Do you always struggle with your pointed edges when sewing? Trying to get them finished perfectly and you end up with something like this? Oh, sorry about that. Or even something manageable like this, knowing fully well that this is not what you want, but you're like, half bread is better than none, so let me make do with what I have. Knowing fully well that there is something better, but you do not know exactly how to go about achieving that. And this is the reason I bring to you this insightful tutorial on how to get your pointed edges perfectly done without having to struggle. And with that being said, guys, you are most welcome to yet another interesting and insightful tutorial. In case you're new here, you are most welcome. My name is Chichi, and if you're a returning subscriber, thanks for always coming back. Ordinarily, all you have to do is to stitch round your piece of fabric that you want to give the pointed edge to or pointed edges to. You have them stitched around like so. As you can see, I have a collar I am stitching at this point. So I stitched the collar all the way around, and then I have the edges trimmed out, and after trimming the edges out, it's now time for the main thing, which is having our pointed edges perfectly done. So you start by doing all you know how to, using every sharp object or every pointed object around you to get that perfect and pointed edge. But sometimes you end up having not exactly what you bargained for, leaving you with something as heartbreaking and devastating as this, especially when you are in a hurry to finish up. And with this, you are left with no other choice than to start all over, left frustrated and almost stranded. And then in giving it your best all over again, you end up with something manageable as this. And you're like I said earlier, half bread is better than none. At least I don't have my pointed edges punctured like I had earlier. But guys, this is a no, okay? Let me show you the trick. You know your sewing thread, you get your sewing thread just like this of any choice, and then you have it folded into two like this, and then you fold again into two, giving you a total of 4 strands of your thread, okay? So you can see I have this as my 4 strands of thread folded together, and I have this set aside, and then I get my piece of fabric that I want to sew, and of course I begin my stitching. For the collar, all you have to do is you start from the other side that you want to start your stitching from, and you stitch close. You can see you leave your ½ inch normal that you use for your stitching allowance, and you get your thread and you place your thread between the two collars, and then you have your needle stitched just once. Can you see? At this point, I pull my thread, it is not coming out. I raise my bar, and you can see I pull it. That means the needle is holding down the thread, and then I get the threads together and I pull it to the other side of my collar or whatever you are stitching, put it in between, and then you have it covered, and you continue your stitching all the way to the other end. I repeat the same process. I stitch ½ inch before I place the thread in between, and then have just one more stitch after placing the thread. I pick up the 2 sides of the thread, I place it again in between my collar or the piece of fabric. Do not put it straight so that the needle does not stitch on the thread, and then you finish up your stitching, okay? So after stitching, all you do, you cut out your thread and trim off your edges, that's the pointed edges. And at this point, it's time for me to turn out, and what I just do, I pull out the thread, make sure I pull it very well so that the pointed edges is very sharp. You can see this is how you go about your stitching. You can see how pointed it is without any stress or any puncturing of my piece of fabric. So you pull very well to make sure that you have all the pointed edges out. And for your 4-corner piece of fabric, all you do is just almost the same process, but this is a little bit different. All you need to do is just to leave some spaces so that you can use and turn out, and you stitch, you come to your edge, you repeat the same process, you stitch, put your thread in between the piece of fabric, and then you stitch around again to the other point. You repeat the same process, put your thread, have one more stitch, place your thread in between your fabric, not outside, okay? And then you just continue the same process for the 4 corners of your piece of fabric. So this is the 3rd corner. I place the thread in between and I'm stitching to the final one, but at this point I left about 1.5 inch for the turning out. Okay, that's the space I'm going to be turning it out. And then for the last thread, you just stitch, repeat the same process. At this point, you make sure that you place all the threads inside. Don't leave anything outside. There's no thread that's supposed to be visible, as you stitch. You just use something to push it in, and then you cover up your stitch. After stitching, you cut out all your sharp edges, and it's time to turn out. So in turning out, especially for your 4 corners fabric, by the time you're turning out, make sure you avoid the threads as much as possible. Can you see? Just make sure you avoid the thread. Even if you come across the thread, make sure you just take it out gently. Avoid the thread as much as you can, so that by the time you're doing, you don't mistakenly pull off the thread before it's time. Okay, you don't pull it out prematurely. So at this point, it's time for me to pull with the thread the 4 edges of the fabric. You can see it's time for me to start arranging all my pointed edges, and as you can see, everything is coming out perfectly well. So this is what the 4 corner fabric looks like at the end of the day, and I proceed to the ironing table to give it a good press. So this is what the collar looks like. You can see how clean, how sharp the edges are looking. You can see there is no dent at the edges of any of them. So as for this one, I'm not top stitching on like the collar, so it's time for me to take out my threads. I pull out my threads, and this is what we have. This is ready for use. And for the collar, I'm going to be top stitching on it, and after top stitching, this is what it looks like. And see how pointed the edges are looking. So this is basically how you go about your sharp pointed edges of anything you want to stitch, to avoid working with manageable stuffs like this when you can have the best pointed or sharp edges for your stitching or your dressmaking. And I'm sure you can notice the difference between these two. Okay, so you have the sharp one and you have the one that is manageable. So like I said, you can always go for the best instead of managing. So guys, this is what a collar with a sharp pointed, well, perfect finished edge or point looks like. I hope you enjoyed watching this video. Please consider giving this video a like, subscribe if you haven't, and drop those your beautiful and encouraging comments in the comment section below. Thank you guys for watching. See you in my next video, and happy stitching.